Welcome to another special edition of Courageous Conversations for Grief Awareness Month and in recognition of Dying to Know Day. In this episode, Griefline's Louisa Smith and Kerrie chat with Picaluna Funerals Death Doulas, Sarah and Kathryn. They delve into the emotional, physical and spiritual support offered to individuals and families during the end-of-life process. Learn what a death doula does, how they make the dying process more peaceful, and hear real-life stories of their impactful work.
Just going to introduce the lovely Sarah and Kathryn, who are joining us today for our Courageous Conversation. And it's a very special topic for us as we'll be launching this on Dying to Know Day. And we are inviting a courageous conversation about the life and the work of death doulas. So over to you, Kerrie, if you'd like to get started.
Thank you. As Lou mentioned, we feel very privileged to have Kathryn and Sarah here today. And we're looking forward to hearing, I guess, about how you support families as they navigate the practical, emotional and spiritual journey of illness, dying, death and grief. So my first question is, perhaps to you, Kathryn, can you please explain the role of a death doula and how your work impacts both the dying individual and their loved ones during the end-of-life journey?
Hi, thank you, Kerrie. Yes, well, I guess the death doula role, it's quite an interesting and yet quite broad brush, you could say, because, different people, traditionally a death doula is contacted by the person who is dying, sometimes their family, but normally by the person who is dying. They're the ones that they feel that need that extra support. And look, that could come in a range of all different ways, whether that be an emotional support, companionship, maybe they just would like to have somebody to talk to around their fears of dying, or maybe there's some advocacy. So if they're trying to have the conversation with their own family, for example, and their families say, "Oh, no, don't be silly, Mum. You're not dying. It's okay." Yet just to be able to help them, verbalize what's important to them. And I think just helping them navigate in any area. So it can be really practical as well. Which I'm sure Sarah can attest to with this, but the practical side of even just helping them with advanced care directives, or just giving them some emotional support of what their end of life might look like, and but always just doing it when they're ready. You're not trying to impose too much too quickly. It's a very, very gentle process. So what I've learned personally is that, of course, then you start building relationships with the family members as well. And, and mostly they are their biggest advocates as well. So we really are just kind of helping them hold that beautiful framework of wanting their loved one to have the best possible outcome of the death that's really supportive. So generally speaking, most people, most families, they're all on the same page through conversations and the support to offer maybe some spiritual guidance, not to claim any spiritual, you don't throw your spiritual values into it, but ask them what it looks like for them, and just giving some comfort and support through those ways, as well as lots of resources and helping them to know what's out there that they might be able to use as time comes nearer and closer.
A simple way to understand it is the word doula means to serve. So we really see our role as coming in to serve the family in and around and supporting that experience of dying and death and after death care and grieving. I often talk about it like it's a non-medical role, just to be really clear. And I often see it as feeling like the gaps and the cracks, or sometimes the potholes that are there in the medical system and of care. That's all really necessary. We need those home palliative care nurses and the team around giving medical care. But what the the doula work does is fill those cracks and gaps and make what can often be disjointed and very siloed and maybe a little bit scary and confusing. We start to weave and integrate that all together. So, you know, we often find ourselves attending to the family or the family's key, the person who's dying's key person and family. They're as much our kind of patient, so to speak. It's the whole family system that is our kind of caretaking focus. And so we're giving relational, emotional, practical, sometimes spiritual support, language, guidance, and really just almost empowering them to do it.
I love that. Yeah, it's so important, isn't it, to give people the tools to allow them to build their own coping mechanisms and I guess ultimately resilience through that process, even though I'm sure it's extremely challenging.
It is. And, you know, Kath and I were talking the other day, and we both, in the way that we both work, rarely find ourselves at the bedside in that very active pinnacle moment of dying. Our work's done on either side of that, almost, in terms of you know, being able to prepare, empower and guide and give the information and confidence. Basically, we're confidence builders to the family to go, you've got this, you can do this. Families and people have been doing this for millennia, and it doesn't take a degree to hold and support people and each other through a dying process. It's a beautiful, natural life skill.
Absolutely.
You say that, Sarah, because I guess when I think about how we approach death and dying, you know, I guess from a Western concept and our death literacy, you know, it's not great. And, you know, we often, when we come into the world, we talk about, you know, prenatal care, postnatal care, but where is the care at the end of life? And, you know, I think that's the beauty of having these courageous conversations to sort of normalise the end of life experience and talk about it like it's not a taboo subject, and really, you know, yeah, having those conversations to, you know, free up the families to, you know.
Yeah.
And also, Kerrie, I think it's and Sarah, of course, add into this, but it's also a really precious time to build ritual as well. So we often get asked, I'm caring for a lady at the moment, and she said, I've got a few weeks left. How am I going to best use that for my family? What can I leave for them? So it's really kind of just with those, with that sort of outpouring, you kind of understand, okay, so it's imminent, and, you know, she's still obviously mentally able and has some energy to put things into place. And what does that look like for each individual in that situation could be completely different. This lady's a bit of a wordsmith, so I can just see her, you know, maybe writing, but some people could do videos. Some people might like to be dressed in a shroud for their funeral, and people can come and add some stitching when they visit and sow seeds on. There's some really beautiful ideas out there, that's for sure. But using the word and preparing the family with rituals. So could be through sort of even storytelling, but even those pregnant pauses of just letting sentences just sit so they can start creating their own rituals within that as well. So, you know, ritual traditionally can be used with symbols, but it can also be just beautiful acts as well.
Yeah. And the idea of ritual doesn't have to be something really intricate. Like Kath said, it's simplicity, it's slowing things down, it's just almost just setting a heart intention to just make this a little bit more sacred and special and presence, you know, just really kind of presencing. Put the phone away, you know, take a few deep breaths, still in, you know, get grounded, and then the smallest, littlest things kind of can emerge to be really big and significant.
And also to carry them through not only towards the end of life, but also post-death. And the symbolism, if they're using symbolism, can be brought into the funeral and something they can take home and instill in their everyday life or significant events or whatever works for them. But it is, I think it's the power now that we need to go to, because there's, you know, a lot of people have pulled away from the church where they would go and go to a place to do their prayers or some sort of go somewhere for this acts of love. But in this day and age, in our non-secular society, what do we have? The foundation. We need the foundation, and rituals are a very powerful way to create that space in our lives to do that.
Yeah. And just reflecting on what you were saying before, Sarah, about where you, when you're working with people, you know, it's before the death and post-death. And I think sometimes, you know, from a counselling perspective, you know, the people that we work with, you know, there's a lot of talk around sometimes those missed opportunities. So, you know, I see your role as, you know, being pivotal in perhaps nurturing some of those opportunities, you know, perhaps before someone.
Exactly. You know. I had a family in my office last week. They came on the Monday afternoon. They'd been vigiling for maybe on and off for a week with their mother, starting to kind of prepare for her passage and transition, and they were really stressed about it, and they wanted to kind of funeral planner, and then I slowed them down and just talked and guided them through this idea of what Kath and I learned a while ago together about this map, giving them a map of the process of the dying and how everyone plays their role, and the map being that you know, the role of the goal in death is to separate the soul from the body, right? And there's a map to doing this, and that there's the village of the living on one side of a river, where there's the village of the ancestors and those that have already passed before. And our goal is to allow that passaging and ushering of the soul across. And so, you know, I had the family here who wanted to plan the funeral, and I said, look, we've got an idea of what that looks like. Let's just kind of give you some support right now in what is an important part of the process for you, is to go back and be with your mum in a way where you're prepared, you really know what your role is. You know, we had a very senior kind of son, the kind of head man in the family now, really kind of holding back his tears. And I told him that the energy of our grief, which sort of comes up and out, is to kind of almost sort of move that soul across the river passage. And while we're on the side of the river where we're the village of the living, and our job is to grieve, and it is to kind of prepare to say goodbye, and to kind of you know, kind of envelop that person in lots of love and stories and comfort and tenderness, and release them to go. And I said, your tears and your sadness are part of this. They're to do that. And he just broke down there. He just kind of felt permission to kind of cry and move all this energy. And I kind of gave them this map of the dying and their role, and knowing that on the other side, at exactly the same time, like mirror rituals, there's the village of the ancestors preparing a homecoming and welcoming her home. Who's going to be there? And it's going to be, you know, her husband and her mum and her dad and everyone kind of just sort of got it. Like, it doesn't have to, you know, it can be any kind of universal spirituality, most things that can map over that idea of a crossing over, and those that are living and those that are dead, and it just sort of allowed them to understand what their role was, that they actually had a role to do, and talking about that crossing and who would be there to greet her and receive her and celebrate, just gave them a language and a landscape to go back to her bedside with no angst, a lot of preparation, a lot of relief. And she passed a few hours later into that evening, and they all knew what to do. They all weren't scared. They were prepared and ready to slow it all down and be involved, asked to be involved in the wash and the dress, and they had some oil ready to anoint, and they'd figure out what they wanted to kind of wrap and shroud her in. And you know, it just transformed the whole experience for them. I only had a few hours, but it was enough to just shift everyone's energy around it. And a lot of what Kath and I do, and all the rituals and all this sort of preparation and conversation and discussing is really about just kind of moving the energy, keeping things moving and guiding and shifting and transforming and changing what needs to be done. And they just they got it, and they could do it.
And what you did, Sarah, in that moment was empower them, which is and give them that confidence. That's right.
Yeah, and they totally walked out in a different energy too, and they walked in and they went straight to the nursing home and took that, and I know, and you know, I think
and look what unfolded. Yeah.
But it's almost like they were seeking permission to behave in a certain way that was against societal norm, and it sort of had me thinking that the work that you both do, a lot of it would be around, I guess, debunking myths and educating and helping people understand, you know, that they can grieve in their own way and in their own time. And I guess I wanted to know how much of the time that you spend with families is working on that and removing that stigma and helping them to breathe a little bit easier through their grief.
Yeah,
lots.
Yeah, it's the preparation work really that
so much. You know, that preparation is everything. And Kat, I mean, when we get the chance to go in and do that foundation work, to do that preparing, most of the time it makes an enormous amount of difference, doesn't it, Kat?
Yeah, absolutely. You can you can see that the ownership of it all too, don't you, Sarah? You see that people have just stepped into that ownership because they've had that time for preparation, and just all about being aware of that a death doula service is even available. So I think that's half the battle too, Kerrie and Louise, that people don't have any idea that this service is even available. But it can be just so profoundly healing and helpful to these families. Yeah.
That idea of ownership, Kath, is right. We talk about agency, you know, and in grief and in death and in hospitals and in sickness and disease, all our agents, lots of our agency gets taken away, right? And this is just about restoring some of it, right? You know, just to give them that permission, Lou, like you said, to just, yes, you're allowed to grieve. Yes, you're allowed to feel. Yes, you're allowed to slow it down. Yes, you can say no to kind of rushing things and taking your person away too quickly and all of that. It just gives them a little bit of a guide and a scaffolding to hold on to figure their way through this, because that kind of idea of ritual as well is about providing some structure where all structure starts to kind of really dissolve and go away. And so to be able to, all you're doing with this, with a ritual, is structuring how you want to kind of hold still, move, pause, energy again, right? And you can create a ritual anyhow, any hoots, with anything, right? Just what do you want? What do you need? What is it to doing? What's its intention?
Yeah. And so I'm curious, how much of your time would be spent with the person dying compared with the family? Or does that depend by client and their needs and expectations?
I don't know about you, Kath, but for me, I can do a lot of end of life and doula work and never meet the person who's dying sometimes,
Right.
which is a bit odd, right? You know, and in a way, you know, it can happen over the phone a lot as well, not in person. That's not ideal, but that is often how sometimes it unfolds. And even that that kind of resistance around death is almost sometimes the family members are gatekeeping you from the person who's dying, because like it's not, maybe then if you meet them, they're really going to die, right? Ideally, you know, when it is a fully holistic and integrated and just like experience, right? Kath will know this. It's like we're in there, we're immersed with the person and the family, and it's just a all in stacks on kind of process. But it actually can happen sometimes that we're really we can be one step removed from the person that's dying, partly maybe because they're already just so tenderly on their way, slipping away, and there's no kind of real ability to engage, and it's just a matter of time. That time window has gone. And sometimes it's because we get, I don't know, I find sometimes you can be gate-kept away from them by the family themselves. So more often than not, we're tending to the next layer out, the family, than often the person right at the center, which is fine because it's that concentric circles, right? You take, you know, the person's in the middle, and then you caretaken by the people out there, and then there's people caretaking the people that are caretaking, you know, so we do that sort of concentric circles model. What do you think, Kath? Do you
No, I was just reflecting on families that I've worked with as well. And I just recalled a few years ago when I was really first starting, this lady, she was in hospital and she'd invited me in, and her children were there, and she was a beautiful mum. You know, often families, you know, family, anyway, just relationships aren't always just where all the siblings absolutely love each other, but in this case they all did. They were so kind and respectful to each other. So beautiful parenting by the mum. And she just looked at me and I looked at her, and then I sat down next to her and she just started telling me her life story, and I was just scribing away. And after I left, she closed her eyes and went into a coma. And that was how it all unfolded. And it was really, really special. And the family, you know, they honoured their spiritual beliefs, and they had an Anglican church. But I stepped into, you know, delivering her eulogy the way she told me, which was a really great honour. But you're right, like Sarah was saying, sometimes you know, I find you generally do meet the person, but it could maybe only be once or twice. But, you know, another sort of role that I personally and Sarah have called in on is, once the death occurs, some information that a lot of families don't know is that you can keep your loved one at home for up to 5 days. New South Wales Health allows that. But obviously you need to protect the body. So we, you know, have cooling plates for that purpose. You can use ice, a dry ice or bags of ice. It doesn't have to be that way. But I think from societal perspective, this lovely slate plate that the body lies on, and the person's still lying in bed with the covers over it, cool room, and people can come and visit then for the next few days for as long as the family would like their loved one at home. It's really great way for people to keep hold of their loved one, because at the end of the day, when you even hand over to a funeral director, I think what a lot of people don't understand is that actually that person belongs to them every step of the way. And it's really important that they know that. And I tell all my families that from day one, whether in the doula role or funeral director role, but it's you make the calls, what suits you as a family. And again, it's just stepping into that ownership when that, that scaffolding that Sarah was describing feels like it's all broken down. It starts to rebuild again. And that's all with that love and tenderness and the autonomy to create something really personal and meaningful for that family.
I tell you where it's becoming more, I suppose, individual patient led now, is, I was having a conversation yesterday with a friend, and she is now on the pathway for voluntary assisted dying. And so this is definitely, I suppose, a really next level change in the landscape of where and how Kath and I work. I've now got 2 potential clients who have asked me to prepare them and their families for voluntary assisted dying. And this is definitely coming from the person who is dying, and they're bringing their families now into this discussion that they cannot avoid. And then they have to be participant and engaged and prepared and be doing the journey and traveling with them. And so this is really significantly going to change and next level into what we do, because her situation is that some family members she's estranged from, some family members have mental health issues and can't kind of deal with it. Some family members are absolutely on board. How that family landscape is complex. And to kind of, all of us sort of travel and support her to that point is going to be a really interesting process and endeavor that we're only just beginning right now.
I think you and Kathryn will experience this a lot more now, and I know that Kerrie could probably add a huge amount of value to this theme, given that you've had and continue to work in that bad support group space with the people after the death of their loved one, so after their bad death. I mean, what are the biggest sort of conversation points, Kerrie, that you have in those groups with those people?
Yeah, I guess just reflecting on what you were talking about just then, Sarah, the word preparedness comes to mind, and obviously that's a big part of the work that you do. And I think that has been really helpful for a lot of people that have, been through the process. That's not to say that's the case for everyone, because some people have a very challenging experience with the VAD process, so it's very unique to the person. But I think that idea of having that time to sort of have these conversations about what end of life looks like for that person, having those opportunities to, say goodbye to the people, family, or put things in place. It's having those opportunities that I think a lot of people that come to our support groups have found really helpful, in the their person dying. So, it sounds like that is going to be a big part of the work that you do when you are supporting people through that VAD process. My
only 2 immersions really so far in having these initial conversations with the person who is choosing a VAD pathway. For both of them, what's really important, and that they get agency and control over now, and a lot of input, is that very sort of sacred window that you just don't usually have a much opportunity to kind of prescribe, like, I'm going to die here, and this is how I'm going to die, and this is who I want there, and this is what we want to do. And these, this is where now it becomes incredibly exciting in a way, if I can use that languaging, because I'm co-designing an entire kind of ritual interface to the dying process, right? My two clients in this space really want and to have important kind of agency over what happens to their body, who is there, what gets done. One of my clients, she's Buddhist, right? And we've got all the texts that are going to be kind of chanted before, during, and after. All of that, in the normal kind of randomness, unpredictability of death can kind of just get lost in the disruption of it, and the displacement of it, and the poor timing of it. So it's I've been a celebrant for almost 20 years, and I'd have people come up after a funeral or even after a wedding, go, oh, we'll book you in for our funeral. I'm going, oh, I can't do that. And I can't believe the day is come and here that we can have these really serious preparations to that level of granularity with some people, and it's extraordinarily empowering.
I think,
Kerrie, you must see that we're just talking, Louise was just saying that, you do that post-VAD care, which, I have noticed that unless they're really well prepared, it is a massive shock for the family still. And what do they do with that? So I imagine you are quite busy trying to help them navigate the control over their death, which, of the person that's died, but which is just, like Sarah said, just such a life-changing from this day forward, really. It's different. So you can be prepared, but you can still be it's still very unexpected to know that at 10 a.m. on Friday morning, that's it. And we've always just followed a soul's journey, for example, and people, cross over that threshold when they are ready, when their soul is ready to leave their body. But this is so different for families now. And
but that post-VAD care, I would love to see how we can engage doulas like Kathryn and myself to do the pre-care, because we know from our work, just in a normal kind of death and dying trajectory, when the more pre-work you do, it's such a more integrated, supported, holistic, capacitated and resourced experience for people in their post-death grieving, right? I mean, we all, there's grieving all along the way at different ways, but that it's just so much more resourced and capacity to be able to go in and be able to know you can do it, and know, or at least know the map. That map and that pathway is really important.
And circling back to what you were talking about before, I guess that idea around advocacy in your role, a lot of people that we speak to in our post-VAD groups, they want to honour, their loved ones' wishes to, go through the VAD process. And that's not always something that they want for themselves, to see their, loved one access VAD. So, there is a lot of tension.
Yeah.
Thing. So I can see where that would be really beneficial for you guys in this space to, support someone in that VAD space, to not only help the person who's choosing VAD to navigate the process, what they want for their end of life, but also, you know, as you've been saying throughout this interview, you know, that holistic view and supporting the families and you know, navigating that so the person who's dying, you know, can do it in a way on their terms and being well supported.
Death is a collective endeavor anyway. It's not just the person who's dying that is experiencing, you know, the death, right? It's everybody around them. And what happens is that, you know, when someone dies in a family system, in a community system, you know, there's this absolute nuclear bomb goes off of disruption and rupture and disorder, right? The whole system kind of is super fragile and can collapse, right? And a lot of grieving is just about kind of finding your order again, right? But if you can do a kind of a map that journey, not just for the person who is dying, but for everyone in the system around them, you know, the ability for everyone to kind of have a bit of robustness to that disorder and collapse and just sort of chaos for a while, and all know that they're doing this dance to kind of reorder again. Like if you're talking about rituals, one of the ones that we learned on a course we did not long ago, and I've already employed a couple of times already in my death care practices, is that, you know, I've had the chance to have families be around their person, whether it's sort of after death or at the funeral in the coffin, we're a circle all around them and the person's at the center. And then we say goodbye, and that separation has to happen, a burial, off to cremation, hearse leaves, right? And what I've done is then I get the family again to reform that circle and just kind of look around, feel around, notice the empty space, notice the gap, notice, just sort of now see who's in this family system and kind of lean in and kind of, I mean, take another step in and kind of feel everyone's, I just kind of feel the reordering kind of happening on a somatic level, right? Just look around, your person's not here anymore, right? And just kind of get your body and your energy system and your psyche just a little bit kind of first aware of, everything's changed, right? And I did this with a family whose mother died, and it was the last of the senior kind of mothers, fathers, grandparents in the system, right? And so all the siblings who were saying goodbye to their mum now were the senior elders in the family, and kind of just noticing, you know, got everyone to just shimmy one step to the right? You know, it was like another kind of revolution on the spiral, and just kind of feel it and just notice it and step into it, right? And
so powerful,
really powerful, right? And
reorientation,
a bit unnerving as well, you know, because it's, you know, it's the first, what's not in this landscape though?
Right?
But doing it with all your loved ones and everyone going around going, oh wow. But just part of the therapeutic kind of tool in the toolkit for me is just naming and narrating, just almost commentating for my families just what's going on, right? And they go, oh yeah. And that's powerful enough.
What we notice, and Kerrie, you could probably articulate this a lot better than me, but when we're working with, you know, whether it's someone on the telephone support line or in the groups, is a big part of the grieving process is acknowledgement and acceptance. And the acknowledgement might be actually just as hard as the acceptance, and that all comes at very different times for different people as well. And we know there have been people that we've worked with regularly who know that the person has died, but they're not quite ready to acknowledge it, and therefore it's not real. But yeah, Kerrie, you could probably articulate that a lot better than me.
I think you did a fabulous job. And I think, you know, reflecting on both Kathryn and Sarah, your role as death doulas, I'm curious to get your thoughts, having those opportunities to, you know, prepare and sit in this space and to create those opportunities for acceptance and acknowledgement, like Louisa just mentioned, how that impacts, you know, the people post-death. You know, I'm not sure what the follow-ups like for you. You know, how long do you support the person post-death? I know you both sort of in that counselling space as well, but, you know, having those opportunities to acknowledge and have acceptance, how that impacts on a person's grief, you know, post-bereavement. Just curious on your thoughts on that.
Can let Kath.
Oh, no, that's okay. No. Well, look, to be honest, actually, I don't do I'm not a counsellor, but Sarah does that beautiful counselling work. I mean, I will traditionally follow up with families anyway and just do a check-in, you know, just to see how they're travelling. But I guess the doula work does prepare you for just being present for people and with people. So if you can just, you know, step into their home again, or just pick up the phone and have those conversations just to see how they're going. I mean, it's, you know, times are really tough. Times are really tough. As you, Louise and Kerrie would know, you receive those phone calls. So, you know, the power of Griefline to do that work as well. So but Sarah definitely does more hands-on sort of counselling work with in that regard. So yeah, but so it comes with an intention and a heart to check in, but and to listen and to support, but not without the study and the whole heart that Sarah brings.
And as you guys know, in Griefline, I mean, there's definitely value in having training in counselling and therapy, and we can all do it, right? We all have to do it. We all have to step in and do it. It's a community. I mean, that's what you know, the value of community is. I'd love to be able to kind of have a way to reach more people, to just be able to resource them to be a bit more present, to just actively listen, or to listen and reflect, you know, back, to be able to kind of hold space for an empathetic conversation. You know, less, you know, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? You know, a lot more listening can take place, or gentle kind of questioning that allows people to kind of open-ended kind of just be able to describe into their experience and be able to share and know that it's safe to share without someone trying to cheer them up or jolly them up or distract them, right? Or, you know, all of that kind of stuff. We're really good. Just therapeutic listening just allows people to kind of share exactly where they're at, and for you to just listen and understand and kind of, you know, really give sacred witness to that. Grief needs that, right? And we can all do that if we just, you know, just practice and skill into it a little bit. What I was going to say about how Kath and I uniquely work is that, you know, we also do work as funeral directors and celebrants as well. So when we're working in our ideal way, which is like really traversing that whole passaging, right? We do get to hold our families across the experience of the dying and the death and the post death kind of funeral, which is in and of itself a really unique space, isn't it, Kath? And then the ceremony as well. And you can see how the trajectory of that acceptance can happen when it's done, you know, with enough spaciousness and gentle pacing and proper holding. Like we get there in a much safer way. And it's interesting to kind of watch those who don't participate in that trajectory and kind of insert themselves there at the funeral, really just not in the same place as those in the family who have done that arc.
Yeah.
And it's you know, it's interesting because in ceremony, what I have to do sometimes, or often, is that I know that I've got a family who've done that, right? And then people who just arriving at the ceremony still in that first shock and death disbelief, right? And you've got to almost kind of attend to that at the beginning of the ceremony again and give a really gentle kind of summary again of what has just happened, right?
Yes,
And how
yes.
it's happened. And I'll, you know, in that ceremony, I'll give them, you know, if I can, a general kind of image and summary of how that person has died,
Yeah.
right? So and so, you know, died at the wee hours of the morning with their loved ones around them. And, you know, I'll give a little bit of you know, with the permission of the family as to how they want that language, because I've got to catch these people up.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I can relate because I had a friend who died earlier this year and they'd been very unwell and interstate, so I hadn't had the chance to visit them, you know, in hospital and while they were in palliative care to the end of their life. And so you could tell the family had been on that journey, and there was a lot more peace with them. And then there was myself and, you know, several other friends, and we sort of turned up to the funeral and we're completely bereft and just and there it was almost like his immediate family and friend, like children, were comforting the friends that hadn't you know, been there in the last few months of his life. And it was extraordinary to feel them hold space for me in my grief. And I'm like, hang on, but you're his daughter. But yeah, it was a really beautiful, obviously they'd been through a really uniting experience as a family through those last months of his life. And it was a beautiful, beautiful experience to actually be a part of that and witness that. And it really was a completely different dynamic to what I'd witnessed in previous funerals.
And also, Louisa, there's you know, there's the aesthetic of a coffin when you have lost a loved one and you turn up to a funeral. The reality of the coffin, that their person, your loved one, is in that, your friend is in that. That can be very, you know, very difficult for most people. But I think, you know, just backing on what Sarah said, that preparation work by the family, when it's done really well, is that shock and that, you know, because it's another piece of reality that, oh my gosh, yes, they've died, but now they're here in a box, right? And so how do we just bring that and help them catch up, help people catch up to that? So and honor that, and you know, just even in that, being able to write on the coffin, or pick a cutting from your garden to contribute, or write a message on a post-it note, or whatever, you know, just bringing some kind of ritual for people there to interact, to engage, to help with their own healing.
I just had a family have the coffin over the weekend, and they had all the grandchildren and all the great-grandchildren and all the siblings, and they spent the whole weekend painting and decorating it, right? So I've had a couple of services in the last couple of over this month where we've done that, and you know, that absolutely, if you can kind of open that up to a bit more of a broader kind of next layer out of peeps, right? There's a lot more a kind of acclimatizing to that, because I do see the value of you know, coming and kind of interfacing with that coffin, as much as it is a confronting thing for some people, it's because it has to, that's one of the stepping stones to accepting. And
Yes.
and it is real.
Yes.
You know, I talk about kind of, you got to pass through the eye of the needle. You can't you have to go through it, right?
Yes.
Mm.
You've got to
Yes.
thread the needle on this. There's no
Totally.
bypassing it. So
Yeah.
hard as that is, it is actually one of the steps. You know, when we do, I don't know about you, Kath, but when I do memorial, that kind of tending to that death story becomes even more important, because the coffin's not there. People can
That's
kind of, you know, it might be a month maybe since from death to memorial, and they've not seen the person, they've not interacted with the care of the aftercare kind of body rituals. There's no engagement with a coffin or a classic style funeral which has the coffin present, and you're really doing that reverence separation. They come to a memorial and there's still like a real kind of big kind of marshmallow gap between the death and what you're doing there. If you don't kind of use the words died, death, present what's happened, you know,
That's right.
acknowledge, you know. So yeah,
Yeah.
it adds a piece of work to do if you missed that.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
such an important comment, and yeah, absolutely needs to be acknowledged, and quite poignant given that we'll be publishing this conversation on Dying to Know Day, and just the importance of using the appropriate language and you know, the finality of words such as died and death, and you know, and not glossing over that language, particularly when we're working with younger people as well.
Oh yeah.
And just so that they do acknowledge that there is that end that has occurred. I know we have gone way over the time, but before we wrap things up, Kerrie, was there any other sort of parting comments, or even just a final question, any sort of inquiry from these lovely ladies before we wrap things up?
Yeah. I guess, you know, we've talked a lot about what you do, you know, caring for others at the end of life. And, you know, it can be emotionally taxing. So I guess we'd just like to get a bit of a feel for how you practice self-care, you know, maintain your own well-being while supporting others, you know, through this experience. I think it's really important to highlight that.
It is, Kerrie. It's really important. And you know, if you don't do it properly, if you don't put yourself first, be the love of your own life, be the love of I have to be the love of my life. It's really actually, you know, just to factor in it takes discipline, because to build in some exercise when you wake up is often not the easiest thing to do if you're really tired. But I tell you, it does carry you. Just a simple walk. I'm not far from the bush, or I'm about a 15-minute drive to the beach, but I just love to get up and I go to a lookout near my home and just do some breath work and listen to the birds and just have the sun in my face, and then continue on with a big walk and come in and start the day. And I know that the more I do it, the more I need it. And it takes a while though to actually, for some are really good at it, aren't they, Sarah? But it does take.
I'm a bit of a diva for self-care.
Yeah. You see, and I'm the sabotager.
It's funny. I just I broke my ankle 7 weeks ago, and it was my right ankle, and I needed my husband to drive me everywhere. So I have turned into a diva of a diva. But I was just going to say on self-care, I think I'm going to do. Yeah, I've got a PhD in it now because I need it, because I also wear another professional hat where I'm a marriage therapist. And so I need a lot of self-care. But I agree with Kath, moving that body, been a bit hard with a broken ankle, but I'm on the rehab now. But swimming, vitamin C, as in the ocean sea, is really one of my main tools in my toolkit. I do a lot of energy work as well. I also want to acknowledge that I have a wonderful team around me. Like, you know, the silent hero that is my really supportive and wonderful husband who knows the work I do and just kind of, you know, is just filling in the gaps and giving the support, and, you know, knows when I suddenly have to games on and I'm off and gone. Is wonderful, and in a beautiful kind of group of girls and friendships, and my mum who just, you know, just, I keep my world as much as I can a sanctuary and drama free, and nurture my important relationships. And then that's, you know, that just, you know, and the basic 5: sleep well, eat well, exercise, be out in nature, and get connection and community.
Yeah, it's such good advice. And I know that you have written an article for us, which will be published on
I
the
have.
website. So for all of the people that work in this space, Sarah has imparted some great tips and advice from her own experience around how you can take care of yourself while you're taking care of others. So that'll be published in the Griefline Grief and Loss Resource Hub.
And also just that mortality muscle that I talk about, I think, in that article, like, you know, when I do feel the grief, like, you know, it penetrates and it hits, and it kind of sometimes activates and triggers personal ones as well. I just I suppose in the end of the day, I take the opportunity to do it, right? Just go in, acknowledge and be with my feelings, and kind of just feel like it's an honor to be able to grieve, because if you're grieving, you're also loving.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah.
And it's a natural thing, right? We've got to debunk that there's something wrong with you if you're grieving and feeling big, hard feelings. I mean, hello, that's life.
Right?
And
that's love. It's love.
Yes.
That's it. Yeah.
And do them, you know, just learn how to do your emotions with a bit more kind of resilience, and some tools from my toolkit if you need them, and that when you do them, they move so much more freely and fast. And, you know, on the flip side of grief, if you spin that coin, is joy, right? And creation and life. Right. So, you know, it's natural, it's normal, go and do it.
It's such great advice. And I just want to thank you so much for your time. I've just loved this conversation. Kerrie, any parting words?
Yeah, no, it's been fabulous. And the takeaway for me, and I think it's really in line with our values, you know, at Griefline, is connection and community. And I think these conversations we can create, you know, community, connection, you know, that collective way of grieving, rather than it just being left to the individual to do it alone.
That isolation is the worst feeling.
And love to everybody who might be watching this. All our love to everyone out there with their big feels and holding their loved ones tenderly in their hearts, and we honor you.
Thank you so much.
Beautifully said, Sarah. Thanks, Kerrie. Thanks, Louisa.